Realtor, certified coach, former mortgage broker. You're on, right, Michael? Okay. He specializes in helping people build multi-million-dollar real estate portfolios through creative financing and planning, with a passion for reaching and sharing the most important facts on real estate and economics. Kathy is frequently guest expert on media such as CNN, CNBC, Fox News, NPR, CBS, Watch Market, and Wall Street Journal. I don't know how you do all that, Kathy. That's amazing when I see that up on the internet. I just go, wow. She's a star. And she also hosts the Real Wealth Show, which is a featured podcast on iTunes with listeners in 27 different countries. Let's welcome Kathy. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here. So I just click away.
Let's go over here.
Okay. How are you? Great. Good. Anybody here a first timer? No? Breaks? Yeah? Okay, good. Wonderful. Welcome. How many people, I'm just going to get a feel for who's here so I don't repeat or tell you things you already know. Anybody here own, buy, and hold real estate? Okay. Rent properties? All right. Good. And then how many are flippers? I have flippers? All right. Apartment people? Commercial? Duplexes? Okay. Anybody invest in property out of state? Hey! Anybody from Switzerland? Oh, wow! How did I know that? Can you believe she came all the way here for this moment? Actually, Sabine and I were like, she was an exchange student when we were 19. Isn't that cool? She's here this week. And we were, yeah! And we came to Santa Barbara together, so we're back. Very fun. She probably does not like that I just put her on the spot. All right, let's see. So anybody, I didn't hear the out-of-state. Do we have out-of-state investors? Okay. All right, where? What states? Yes. Texas and Hawaii. I like the second one a lot. They're both good. And what about you?
Colorado.
Okay, great. How are those going?
Excellent.
That market's been booming, huh?
Red hot.
Is it because,
In Denver.
just because they're going there so they can smoke weed? Is that why?
No.
I read an article about it, that because of it, prices are going up because people are moving there. Anyway. And smoke or sell it, yeah, okay. All right, I'm sure there's other reasons. Okay, well today I thought this would be a good, I like to do the market cycle presentation because everybody says that, what are the three things people say you should know about real estate, the most important things? Location. Yes. Okay, so if you bought a property in 2006 in Stockton, and you bought the same property in 2009, would location have been the most important thing? It would not. So that's all baloney, okay? Throw that out the window. It's market timing. That is the most important thing. You have to know your market timing. So we're going to go over a few ways to see that so that you never buy in 2006 and that you learn to buy in 2009, right? That you know how to buy the deals and you know what to look for so that you can sell when it's a seller's market and buy when it's a buyer's market. So who do we trust for this information on market cycles? In 2005, this was the cover of Time magazine. Home Sweet Home, why we're going gaga over real estate. And the whole article speaks to why it was such a fantastic time to buy. And looking back, was that true? Not at all. And people who bought that year most lost everything. So then, in 2010, Time magazine comes out and says, rethinking home ownership. Why owning a home no longer makes economic sense. Was that good advice in 2009?
No.
Why?
Best time to buy.
Best time to buy. It was the lowest possible, maybe 2009 even better, but this was a time when you could have the lowest interest rates and the lowest home prices, and first-time home buyers could have gotten the market and had a fixed payment for 30 years. Do you in Switzerland have 30-year fixed-rate mortgages? No. Was it a concept anyone would they say you're crazy? Yes. Nobody does, a 30-year fixed rate mortgage doesn't exist outside of the US because it makes no financial sense. And it's just government backed, that's why it works. But you know, these homeowners could have, if they had listened to this advice, which many did, they would have not bought at the right time. They would have not locked in the lowest rates, the lowest payments for 30 years, and would have stayed renters. And what do we know about renters today? What's happening with rents? Every year. And who's that good for? The landlords, right? Okay. So we can't trust the media. Now, David Leray was the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors. Okay? And in 2006, he came out with this book, Why the Real Estate Boom Will Not Bust, and How You Can Profit from It. February 21st, 2006. The chief economist. Really? How many of us were around in 2006? Okay, probably everyone. How many people here thought maybe something was wrong with the real estate market at that time? Okay, are you an economist? You're just a person with common sense, right? It doesn't take a lot. I was in mortgages at that time, and I'm thinking, you know, I'd walk into my office and there would be flyers on my desk from banks saying, $5 million loans available, no income, no assets, NINA loans. I don't know if anybody's in that, but no, you didn't have to prove any income or assets and get a $5 million loan. You could give that to a homeless person, and they did. And so, you know, it didn't take much to know something was wrong. So again, you've got to be careful who you get your advice from. A lot of times, you probably know more than these economists might. So, and you will certainly after today, because you'll have this information. All right, so market cycles. Okay, we know that market cycle. It just happens every decade. So if we don't know, then just know that it happens every decade. Market cycle. Where are we today in the stock market? We're high, right? What do you think's coming next? More high? Why not? Why won't it keep going up? Interest rates. Because it's the market's cycle, and right now we're at a peak. So what do you think, and when might the stock market turn in another direction?
Interest rates go up.
Interest rates go up? What else? Probably that, yeah. And oh boy, when that one comes down, it's going to affect a lot of things because it's in such a massive bubble right now. So please be careful if your money's in the stock market. So in real estate, what we know is there are ways to really determine when we're at a high in real estate. And so generally, but let's start over here because it'll be easier. We know what a recession looks like because we just went through one. And we know that there's more property on the market, there's in vacancies, people have lost their jobs, there's no new construction, builders just stop building. And everybody's afraid to buy in this time, as they well should be, because they don't know when it's going to stop. But all of a sudden, it gets to a point where it's so low that you just have to be crazy to not buy, which is why it's amazing that Time Magazine came out with that saying don't buy here. Because at that, you know, when it hits the bottom, you just kind of scratch your head and use your common sense and say, this property is 1/4 what it was just a few years ago, and the payment is less than it costs to rent, and I can lock this in, maybe this is a good time to buy. And so smart money sees that and goes in and starts buying, and then buys all the really, really good deals. Other people see that. This is when the hedge funds came in. All of a sudden, there's less inventory on the market because the smart money's buying it. Prices start to increase, and then the media jumps in and says, wow, prices start to increase, and then it feeds itself back up. You start to see less vacancies, but still no new construction because the builders got wiped out here. But as the recovery happens and as prices go up, then builders, you know, money comes back in, builders are able to bring more supply in, they can sell it for a decent price, and so new construction starts and we get into expansion, less vacancies. And because building came to a complete stop, we have this supply and demand issue where now there's very limited supply, whereas here there's oversupply. So all this expansion comes here until, guess what happens? Prices go up, so much that they're not affordable anymore, and the builders build too much and oversupply. So where do you think we are in the California market on this cycle? What was that? Recovery, about a recovery, okay. So if this were the median home price, would you say that in the California market that we are at an affordable, normal, average level?
No.
Okay, so we might be past recovery and more in expansion. Are we past 2006 prices? Have you looked to see if properties are past 2006 levels? Yeah.
In some cases they are.
Yeah, in some cases.
Okay, a lot of markets are and some markets aren't. I think Stockton is still not. There's parts of Riverside area that still haven't bounced back completely. But I can tell you that certainly in San Francisco Bay Area, way beyond. I've heard from local people here that it's past. I know in Malibu where I live, it's beyond 2006 level. So it just depends on the market. But this is something to pay attention to. We know that 2006 was a bubble because that bubble burst. So if we're back at those prices or beyond, then you have to ask yourself, are we back in a bubble? And if so, you know, what's coming next? Will this bubble burst the way it did before, or will home prices just slow down? So, again, I'll ask you, do you think that home prices in California will continue to rise?
Yeah.
Why?
California.
It was California in 2009 too.
California, period.
I mean, it'll do this. It'll do this, and if you hold forever, you're gonna be fine. But unfortunately, if you buy high and then the values drop, you're not gonna get the same kind of reward as if you buy here and drive it up, right? We just have to see. Okay, I'll take the bubble scenario. It won't be the same kind of bubble bursting because we didn't do stupid loans this time, right? These were either cash buyers or they were really tough loans. These people had to qualify. So if there's a slowdown, it would be because coming back to the fundamentals of market cycles, which is
Equilibrium.
Yes, equilibrium, supply, demand. So what happens when we get to a peak and come down is that there's the oversupply. There's more supply than demand, and when there's more for sale, then prices go down. So when builders overbuild, that's when you're going to see it go down. And we're a little ways from that. We're not there yet. So, yes?
Because it costs builders money just to buy the land and begin the project that won't pay off for them for another at least year or 2 years or more.
It takes, we are in about 6 build projects right now, and it can take 3 to 5 years just to get the entitlements. So, you know, it's going to take a while to catch up to oversupply, and that's why most likely we'll see prices continue to rise for a while. Yes?
Another way of looking at it, instead of supply and demand, because the coastal communities in California, there's never going to be enough supply. Another way to look at it is the price to rebuild.
Yes.
So if you're going to buy something that's less than the cost to rebuild it, you're probably in, you know, the low. And if it costs more, or it costs less to rebuild it.
Yeah, you know, I agree with you as long as there's building happening. So if, for example, I've seen a lot of turnkey rental property providers. Do you know what that is? I just did a show on this. There's a lot of companies selling turnkey rental property, and it's like real estate done for you. And one of the things they say is this property is a great deal because it's cost less than the price to buy. But when all the other properties are also that price, then it's maybe not necessarily a great deal, especially if that area is not booming economically. So if you're in Detroit and you can buy a property for $20,000, that's, you know what I'm saying, it's still maybe not a good deal. So it just depends on if, you know, the main things that we look for when looking for markets, and that's what our company specializes in, finding these markets that are good for for buying here and riding it up is job growth. So if we know that if jobs are going in, that's going to attract people, and there probably isn't enough housing because there's job growth, right? All of a sudden there's new people and the same housing, and there haven't been builders for the last 6 years. So now we have supply issues. So we know that builders have to come in those areas where jobs are going. And once builders come in and you bought a property next door for half the cost, then yes, that is a great deal. But if you're in an area where there's no builders going near it, that's maybe not so good. Yes?
Using that same scenario, if a home here is, you know, if you've got a $500,000 mortgage versus Detroit and it's an $80,000 mortgage, the types of jobs that you have are going to be different. I can have a minimum paying job in Detroit and
Yes.
still live there. In
Yeah.
California here, for a $500,000 mortgage, I've got to have a professional job and significant income.
Absolutely, and if
So
they're,
the types of jobs, so it's not
You
just
got
a
it.
job market, it's, you got to break that down as well.
you've got to look at, again, when we look for markets to invest in, one of the most important things we look at is the average income of the area versus the average home price. And if the average income, let's say for example, I'll go on to this slide because this will tell you a little bit about what we did. There's a slide that didn't come up, and I'm not sure why. I think, okay, I don't know where it is, but in 2004, I have a radio show called The Real Wealth Show. It's a podcast. You can just look up your podcast on your iPhone and subscribe to it. And if you do, I'll give you a free book that I wrote called Retire Rich with Rentals, because your subscription to The Real Wealth Show helps our rankings, so I appreciate it. But on that show, I've been able to interview investors who've had 30, 40 years experience and have been through these cycles and have been able to teach me and my audience how to understand them. And so back in 2004 on the show, I was learning from these experts that, what to look for and to see and recognize that California was in a crazy boom bubble and that would not last. And they were also able to show me that in other parts of the country, there was a different thing happening. And at the time, Texas was undervalued. So you had California where it would take your full salary to even potentially pay for the minimum payment that was not even the real payment. You could go to Texas and it was 26% undervalued, meaning there were so many jobs going to Texas and that salaries were going up, but home prices weren't, so affordability was there. So we were teaching people and showing people, okay, this is a bubble, this is a great time to sell, and sell that property and be able to buy 3 or 4 in a market that's just emerging. So sell at the peak, buy down here, and ride that one up. And so that's what we did there. And then in 2007, 2008, we just saw the world falling apart and just like trying to get our footing. We interviewed a lot of people. And then when we saw the aftermath, we saw that the best deals were the foreclosures and distress sales. So we made it our job to find out where you can get these best deals around the country and which areas were going to recover the most quickly. And so we've helped investors buy in those areas. In 2010 and 2014, that's when we saw that land was almost being given away, and there was builders that couldn't get money, but they really knew how to provide the much needed inventory. And people thought we were crazy. They're like, we just came from a market that was all inventory, and now you want to add more to it. But we knew that there were 4.5 million people coming to this country every year, and that that the baby boomers' kids are now the next biggest generation, and they would just be coming in to the housing market, and there'd be new households at least 1 million a year just from our kids. And so we knew there was going to be demand for housing, but no building happening, and there would be a shortage of homes. So we got into this, bought land for 10% of its value, and worked and partnered with developers. And land that we bought for $1 million sold for $20 million. It's been crazy. There's been really great opportunities if you time these things right. Now land is expensive. It's hard to get those deals, unfortunately. So then you say, well, what's the best next thing right now in this market? So I've been invited to be on the news a lot to help them understand and give the right information so that people aren't making mistakes. And then also, like I said, I've got my book. We've got the Real Wealth Investor Academy and the Real Wealth Show. The Real Wealth Show is free and has a ton of information. to check out. So I'm going to just go over this really quickly. It sounds like most of you already know it, but I just want to remind anyone who doesn't that sellers markets and buyers markets can be confusing. But a seller's market is one in which the seller has the power. It means you want to sell. And so how do you know that? You have limited inventory. That means everybody's frantically trying to buy property, but there's not enough supply, demand, too much demand, not enough supply, prices go up. There's bidding wars, price increases, cash flows are terrible in the seller's market, not the best time to try to buy rental property. People can sell property in terrible condition. So if you got a property that's nasty, you don't want to fix it up, you just put a for sale sign out and it will sell. And it might sell for top dollar. You don't have to do anything. But as a buyer, not so good. And this is where the bubbles start to form because the prices go up so quickly, but at the same time, inventory is going to be coming on the market. So you have to be aware, are permits going to be in line with job growth? How do you know that this area is going to get overbuilt? And be able to look at those, to be able to predict that. Buyer's market is the opposite. The buyer has the power. This is the time to buy, right? So you know that you're in a buyer's market when there's a lot of inventory on the market and not enough buyers. That means that the buyer has the power to negotiate. That means that the seller has to fix up the property to gorgeous condition in order to try to sell it. And they still have to discount it because there's few offers and prices are going down, but cash flows are high. So, sellers, like I said, they have to fix up their property, and everybody's afraid of buying when it's actually the best time to buy. That's why you get the good deals. So if you're a buyer, and I know there are some in the room looking to buy investment property for the long term and for cash flow, would this area be the best place to do that? Like, not at all, right? Right, because you're going to be paying top dollar and you're going to have the lowest cash flow. Whereas you can go to a buyer's market and negotiate. There's still parts of the country where you can negotiate. Just like I said, in 2006, we taught people how to sell. I had a lady who came to me in 2006, it was like 2005, 2006. She had 3 Stockton properties. One, they were all worth about $420,000, and they all rented for about $1,200. But they were in a really nasty part of Stockton, and they were really run down. And she came to me because she was making that $3,600 gross every month. But with all the expenses and repairs, these old properties and the vacancies in the parts of town, she was really not making very much cash flow, and she wanted to quit her job. That's why she came to me, and I said, well, if you have the courage and the guts, sell those now. We're in a seller's market, and let's buy in Texas where it's a buyer's market. You're going to sell high, buy low, and guess what? Your $1.2 million portfolio from selling these 3 properties will buy you 10 homes. You're going to exchange these 3. I think in this case we bought her 9 because she wanted to be in higher price markets. And so she bought 9 homes, brand new, in Dallas, for just like almost nothing in 2006, was getting $1,200 a month in rent on each of them. And she was the happiest person in the world because her cash flow tripled. She could retire. She did that wonderful moment where you walk into your boss and say, I'm done. And they're like, what do you mean? You go, well, look at my, yeah. So she was thrilled. And guess what happened the following year?
She got married.
Those baby, yeah. He took all her money and they got a divorce. I'm just kidding. No, the Stockton properties were worth about $120,000 each. So the person who paid $420 didn't do so well. So don't let that be you.
Based on your story too, was that one of those situations where she was able to cash out, including equity, and basically buy it at zero? She owned it outright in Dallas.
She owned them outright.
Yes.
Because she'd had them a long time, but.
I'm talking about the property she's acquired in Dallas. Did she own that outright?
She bought them outright because she was at a point where she just wanted to retire and she didn't want the leverage. But of course, I'm a big fan of leverage, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so for those of you, is everybody familiar with the 1031 exchange? Okay, I'll just say it quickly so you know, when you sell a property that has made a lot of money for you, somebody wants that money. And that Uncle Sam is his name. So they're going to, if it's a lot of money, let's say you bought a property 20 years ago in Santa Barbara, it's worth a lot today. And if you sell that, the government's going to want their piece. but there is something called an exchange, where if you exchange it within 45 days, if you identify properties in 45 days and then close on them in 180, you defer that. You don't have to pay it till till you sell that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and then your children can inherit those properties, and it steps up to market value, and then they never pay it. Loophole. Some people hate us for these loopholes, but it is one. Take advantage. That's how I got into business. I helped my dad with an exchange, because his property, his apartment sold against, it was another manager sold the apartment, he had to pay all this capital gain, he didn't have the money. So we learned together, this is way back when I got into business, how to exchange that tax deferred. So it saved him $300,000 that he would have had to pay in taxes. Then when he passed away, we inherited that property, stepped up, nobody ever had to pay that $300,000. It was a happy day. Not a happy day, it was a terrible day. But from the perspective of real estate, yes. I know, I'm like, love you, Dad. Okay, so I just want to dispel some myths about trying to get your distressed property, trying to get your foreclosures. There were 5 million foreclosures in the past 7 years approximately, but most of those, it's declined quite a lot, except in judicial states. So if you're trying to find your great deal or your short sale or your foreclosure in California, it's getting really hard to do it. There's very, very few, it's trickled down. But in areas that are judicial states where the foreclosure has to go through a judge, it can take 5-6 years to foreclose, like Florida. They are still suffering a foreclosure market, and so prices haven't bounced back yet. So if you kind of look back and say, wow, I wish I had bought in 2009, you kind of still have that opportunity in Florida until they work through this. Yes, buy low, exactly.
Texas and Florida.
Texas isn't judicial. Texas, the prices have gone up, although there's still some deals there, but it's getting harder. But Ohio, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, Indiana, these are areas where there's still a backlog and still an opportunity to get in a buyer's market and cash flow. So let's see, prices keep going. Prices are going up about 6% every year. Inventory levels down. 35 of the top 100 markets are already at past 2006 levels. So Dallas being one of them, Houston. These are all cash flow markets we used to love, but the prices have already bounced back. The next cities that are about to do that, I'll share with you in a minute. I'll just say really quickly that in 2014, we had the highest employment since 1999. So it's improving. It's certainly improving incomes, but incomes rose only 1.8%. But as I said earlier, home prices have been going up 6% on average, and oh my goodness, in the Bay Area, in California, much higher than that. But incomes haven't increased at the same level. So we do need to pay attention to that, make sure we don't get completely out of whack with affordability if you're buying here, which we are. 48% of counties are more affordable than their historic average, and again, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Virginia, whereas 21% are less affordable than their historical average. Do you want to be buying in those areas? No. New York City, San Francisco, Atlanta, Austin. A lot of people ask me about Austin. I say, great market to live in, but not to invest in right now because it is now considered one of the more less affordable markets. And affordable meaning we would look at it and think it's ridiculously cheap. You could buy a mansion for $400,000, but compared to their average income, it's not. It's not affordable. I'm just going to go over this really quickly, but the ratio of home price to income in Beijing, 22%. Biggest, hugest bubble.
60 Minutes, that the Chinese lady on 60 Minutes, I kept that story.
Yeah.
It's amazing what they did in China. I can't believe they did it.
It's frightening, and I'm telling you this so you know what's coming. We know that trillions of dollars has been poured, just created out of nothing and poured into our economy, which has gone into the stock market. It's a bubble, it's going to burst. The same thing has happened in China, where they built cities with no one in them. And so what happens when you have a lot of construction workers working? There's jobs, right? What happens when that stops? And there's nobody living in these cities? Yes,
But people buy these apartments from the story that I saw, so
yes.